Chapter 1: The Loom of Fortune. In the heart of medieval France, during the reign of the revered King Louis IX, the kingdom buzzed with tales of an enigmatic craftswoman known only as Eloise. Her name was spoken in hushed tones, her reputation whispered through the grand halls of nobles and echoed in the bustling markets of merchants. Eloise resided in a secluded village, nestled deep within a forest that seemed to hum with ancient secrets. Her presence was as enigmatic as the shimmering silks she produced, silks so luminous they seemed to capture the essence of moonlight and the first blush of dawn. The journey to her workshop was not for the faint of heart. Winding paths through dense woods led to the edge of the village, where her modest cottage stood apart from the rest. Encircled by an aura of mystery, Eloise's cottage was a simple structure, but its windows often glowed warmly at night, revealing the silhouette of her at her loom. Those who ventured near spoke of the faint melodies that drifted from within, an otherworldly tune that seemed to guide her hands as she wove her silks. Eloise's origins were as elusive as the secrets of her craft. She had arrived in the village many years ago, on a stormy night when thunder growled across the skies and lightning lit the horizon. The villagers, wary but compassionate, offered her shelter in the church. All she carried was a wooden chest containing her loom and a bundle of simple clothes. She spoke little, but her gratitude was evident in her actions. When the storm passed, Eloise chose to remain, asking only for a place to set up her loom. It wasn't long before the first of her silks appeared, a fabric so breathtakingly beautiful that the village tailor declared it to be touched by divine hands. The material seemed alive, shifting hues with the light and flowing like water. Word spread quickly. Merchants, nobles, and even emissaries from distant courts flocked to the village, seeking the ethereal fabrics. But Eloise was selective. She did not sell her silks to the wealthiest bidder. Instead, she asked questions about their intentions, their hopes, and their dreams. One of her earliest patrons, the Duchess of Aquitaine, had approached her with a humble request. The Duchess needed a gown for an important court event, one that could secure an alliance vital to her family's future. Eloise listened, her piercing gaze seemingly peeling back layers of truth. The silk she produced for the Duchess was unlike any other, a deep, velvety blue threaded with silver that resembled a starlit sky. When the Duchess wore the gown, her grace and beauty captivated all, and the alliance was sealed. Another tale told of a merchant on the brink of ruin. His warehouses were empty, his ships lost at sea, and his creditors circling like wolves. Desperate, he sought Eloise, offering her all he had left. She refused his gold and instead gifted him a bolt of silk, instructing him to trade it wisely. The merchant followed her advice, presenting the silk to a nobleman who, in return, financed his ventures. Within months, the merchant's fortunes were restored, and he credited Eloise with his revival. The fame of her work and her mysterious ways grew, eventually reaching the ears of King Louis IX. Known for his wisdom and justice, Louis was intrigued by the tales of this craftswoman who valued intent over wealth. When preparations began for Queen Marguerite's coronation, the king sent an emissary to Eloise with a request for her finest silk. The emissary, a dignified man clad in royal colors, arrived at her workshop with much ceremony, bearing the king's missive sealed in wax. Eloise read the letter with quiet intensity. She then turned to the emissary and, to his astonishment, made her terms clear. She would create the silk, but in lieu of payment, she required a private audience with the king once the task was complete. The emissary, though taken aback, agreed to relay her unusual request. As news of the king's commission spread through the village, so did speculation. What could Eloise possibly want from the sovereign? The villagers, already inclined to view her as a figure of mystique, whispered theories. Some believed she was a prophetess, divinely guided to counsel the king. Others were convinced she was a sorceress, weaving magic into her fabrics. A few dared to suggest she might even be of noble blood, hiding her true identity for reasons unknown. Yet Eloise remained a silent enigma. She spent her days and nights at her loom, her hands dancing across the threads with a grace that seemed almost inhuman. Those who caught glimpses of her at work were mesmerized. She moved with the precision of a scholar and the passion of an artist, every motion purposeful. She spoke to no one about her process, nor did she reveal the inspirations behind her designs. The fabric she created for the Queen's coronation was unlike anything she had woven before. It embodied the dawn's first light, the golden hues of wheat fields, and the soft blush of roses. Every thread shimmered as though kissed by the sun itself. The patterns within the silk told a story, a tale of unity, prosperity, and hope. As the final days approached, the village seemed to hold its breath. Eloise's agreement with the king had elevated their humble home to the center of the kingdom's attention. Merchants and nobles loitered in the square, eager for a glimpse of the fabric that would adorn their queen. Yet, Eloise remained hidden in her cottage, weaving the final threads of what many believed would be her masterpiece. What drove her, none could say. But one thing was certain, Eloise was not merely weaving silk, she was weaving destiny. Chapter 2: Threads of Betrayal. As the days grew closer to the Queen's coronation, the village that had long embraced Eloise's quiet genius found itself swept into the tumult of intrigue and ambition. The news of her extraordinary terms, demanding an audience with King Louis IX rather than payment in gold, spread beyond the village like wildfire. Whispers of the enigmatic weaver reached the ears of courtiers, merchants, and nobles who, in their own way, were captivated by the idea that a common craftswoman could hold the ear of a king. Among the many who heard these whispers was Count Henri of Poitiers. Henri was a man of boundless ambition, known for his sharp wit and even sharper schemes. With no direct claim to the throne but possessing a vast network of allies and spies, he had spent years maneuvering through court politics, always searching for a way to tip the scales of power in his favor. To Henri, the rise of Eloise represented a threat. How could a mere weaver, he mused to his closest confidant, command such favor from the king? If she is not a sorceress, then surely she is a fraud. Either way, her influence must be curtailed. Henri's distrust was fueled by reports from his spies. They informed him of Eloise's unusual requirements for her craft, the exotic dyes, the rare threads, and the meticulous secrecy with which she worked. These peculiarities, they suggested, could be the mark of someone hiding deceit behind a veil of mystique. Determined to unmask Eloise, Henri devised a plan as cunning as it was cruel. He bribed one of her trusted suppliers, a merchant who provided her with the vibrant dyes she used in her silks. The merchant, fearing retribution from the powerful count, agreed to the scheme. He delivered to Eloise a batch of dyes that, while appearing pristine, had been adulterated with inferior substances. When Eloise opened the barrels of dye, her practiced eye detected the subtle differences immediately. The once vivid hues were slightly muted, the consistency thinner than what she had come to expect. At first, she assumed it was a mistake, a lapse in quality control. But as she prepared to use the dye, the true extent of the tampering became apparent. The pigments, when applied to her threads, bled unevenly and dulled the fabric's natural luster. For the first time since arriving in the village, Eloise's calm demeanor faltered. Her hands trembled as she held the flawed threads up to the light, her mind racing. The thought of presenting anything less than perfection to the royal court filled her with dread. Worse still, she understood that a failure of this magnitude would not only tarnish her reputation but might also jeopardize her village, which had grown dependent on the prosperity her work brought. Eloise confronted the merchant, demanding an explanation. The man, visibly shaken, eventually confessed to his part in the scheme but claimed ignorance of the mastermind behind it. His fear of Henri kept him from divulging the truth, even under Eloise's piercing gaze. Left with no clear path to justice and little time to spare, Eloise faced a harrowing decision. Should she abandon the commission, knowing it would cast doubt on her abilities? Or should she press on, risking everything to salvage her creation? Her resolve hardened. To Eloise, the silk was no longer just fabric, it was a statement of defiance against greed and corruption. She immersed herself in her work with an intensity that astounded even those who had long admired her. Eloise drew upon every ounce of her knowledge and skill, calling to mind the ancient techniques she had learned in her travels before arriving in the village. From a hidden compartment in her workshop, she retrieved a collection of rare ingredients, crushed cochineal from distant lands, indigo leaves carefully preserved, and gold dust meant only for the most sacred of projects. These were her treasures, reserved for moments when the stakes were highest. Day and night, she toiled. Her loom became an extension of her will, each thread a testament to her determination. She experimented tirelessly, blending her salvaged materials to recreate the vibrant hues that had been stolen from her. Her fingers were stained with dye, her eyes red from sleepless nights, but she pressed on. The villagers, sensing her struggle, offered what little help they could, bringing her food and tending to her workshop in quiet solidarity. As the days turned into weeks, Eloise's efforts began to bear fruit. The silk took shape, its colors rich and luminous despite the obstacles she had faced. But the experience left a mark on her, not just physically, but spiritually. She began to see her work in a new light, not merely as art but as a symbol of resilience and integrity. The final threads were woven under the light of a full moon, a fitting culmination for a project that had tested her in ways she never imagined. As Eloise stepped back from the loom, she saw in the silk not just beauty, but a story of betrayal, perseverance, and triumph. Yet, she knew her challenges were far from over. The court awaited, and with it, the scrutiny of the king and his nobles. Among them would be Count Henri, who would no doubt be watching for any flaw, ready to pounce at the first sign of failure. But Eloise felt no fear. She had faced betrayal and conquered it with her own hands. Her silk, born of struggle, was her shield and her sword. And as she prepared to deliver it to the palace, she resolved that no force, no matter how powerful, would unravel the threads of truth she had woven into her masterpiece. Chapter 3: The King's Request. The day of Queen Marguerite's coronation dawned with an air of anticipation. The streets of Paris were alive with color and sound as nobles and commoners alike gathered to witness the grand occasion. Flags fluttered from high towers, church bells rang jubilantly, and the scent of fresh flowers filled the air. In the grand halls of the palace, Every detail was meticulously prepared, and at the heart of it all was Eloise's masterpiece, a gown woven from silk that seemed to transcend mortal artistry. When the gown was unveiled, it elicited audible gasps from the assembled court. The fabric was a marvel. It shimmered like the surface of a tranquil lake at sunrise, capturing the glow of dawn and the deep, velvety hues of twilight. Intricate patterns wove through the silk, telling a story of unity, prosperity, and the divine grace that all rulers aspired to embody. Each thread seemed imbued with its own light, creating a sense of movement as though the gown were alive. As Queen Marguerite stepped forward to take her place in the coronation procession, she was transformed into a vision of regal majesty. The gown enhanced her natural elegance, making her appear almost otherworldly. The crowd's cheers were deafening, a testament to the gown's impact. Even seasoned courtiers, accustomed to displays of wealth and grandeur, found themselves humbled by the beauty of Eloise's creation. Despite the triumph of her silk, Eloise herself remained in the shadows, observing the event with quiet satisfaction. Her work had fulfilled its purpose, but her role in the court's affairs was far from over. She had kept her promise to deliver a masterpiece, and now it was time for the king to honor his end of their agreement. The following day, Eloise was summoned to the royal audience chamber. She arrived unaccompanied, carrying a modest bundle wrapped in plain cloth. Her simple attire and unassuming demeanor contrasted sharply with the opulence of the palace, where gold filigree adorned every surface and courtiers draped in jewels lined the hall. Yet, as she entered, all eyes turned to her. The room fell silent, the weight of expectation palpable. King Louis IX sat at the head of the chamber, his expression calm but curious. Known for his devoutness and keen sense of justice, the king had built a reputation as a ruler who valued wisdom over wealth. He regarded Eloise with interest, recognizing that her presence signified more than a mere display of artistry. Eloise approached the throne with measured steps, her head held high. When she reached the foot of the dais, she knelt briefly in respect before rising to meet the king's gaze. "Your Majesty," she began, her voice steady but resonant, "I thank you for granting me this audience. My silks have adorned your queen, and they have brought joy to this kingdom. But they are not merely garments, they are stories, woven with the truths of their time. They reflect the wearer's essence and the spirit of the age." Her words held the court in thrall, but it was her next action that sent ripples through the room. Eloise carefully unwrapped the bundle she carried, revealing a second piece of silk. This fabric was unlike the gown's perfection. It was flawed, its colors uneven, and its patterns marred by small but noticeable imperfections. This silk, Eloise continued, holding it up for all to see, was created with corrupted materials. The dyes I received were tampered with, their purity compromised by deceit. Though I salvaged what I could, the fabric bears the scars of betrayal. It mirrors the dishonesty that has crept into this kingdom, threatening not only my craft but the integrity of your reign. The murmurs that followed her declaration grew louder as her words sank in. Among the courtiers, Count Henri shifted uncomfortably, his usual confidence shaken. Though Eloise had not named him, her statement struck too close to his schemes for comfort. King Louis leaned forward, his expression solemn. "You speak boldly, Eloise, and with reason. Deceit in any form undermines the foundation of justice. What do you propose we do about it?" Eloise met his gaze unflinchingly. "Your Majesty, truth must be upheld, no matter the cost." Those who sow corruption will destroy not just silks, but the very fabric of society. I ask that you investigate this matter, not for my sake but for the integrity of your kingdom. Let those responsible be held accountable, so that honesty and virtue may prevail." The king considered her words carefully. Louis IX was not a man to act rashly, but he understood the gravity of her request. Eloise's courage in bringing such a matter to light impressed him, and her reasoning aligned with his own commitment to justice. "You speak wisely, Eloise," he said at last. "Your craft may be humble, but the truths it reveals are profound. I will see to it that an inquiry is launched, and those found guilty of dishonesty will face the consequences of their actions." The court erupted into a flurry of reactions, some murmurs of approval, others of unease. Eloise remained composed, her mission accomplished. She had delivered more than a masterpiece of silk, she had delivered a message. As she departed the audience chamber, Eloise felt the weight of the court's gaze upon her, but she carried herself with quiet dignity. She knew that her actions would spark both admiration and enmity, but she was unafraid. In her heart, she believed that truth, like the finest silk, was a thread that could not be unraveled. Meanwhile, Count Henri retreated to his quarters, his mind racing. He had underestimated the weaver, and now the noose of suspicion tightened around him. Eloise's boldness had set a chain of events in motion that would test not only the strength of her convictions but the very fabric of the court itself. Chapter 4: The Web Unraveled. The morning after Eloise's audience with the king, a quiet but resolute determination spread through the palace. King Louis IX, deeply moved by Eloise's words, issued a decree, a thorough investigation into the source of the tampered materials. The announcement sent shockwaves through the court. In an era where whispers carried as much weight as deeds, the king's decision signaled that no one, regardless of rank or influence, would be immune to scrutiny. The inquiry was entrusted to Chancellor Etienne, a man renowned for his impartiality and methodical approach. His task was daunting, as the threads of corruption often wove themselves deeply into the tapestry of courtly life. Starting with the supplier who had confessed under duress, the Chancellor's team followed the trail of bribes and deceit, uncovering layer upon layer of intrigue. Eloise, though not directly involved in the investigation, became its symbolic heart. Her unyielding stance on integrity resonated with those seeking to unmask the truth. Villagers and merchants who once hesitated to speak now came forward, emboldened by her example. In hushed tones, they recounted their dealings with agents of Count Henri, piecing together the mosaic of his treachery. The Count himself remained defiant, confident that his network of loyal allies and his cunning would shield him from consequences. However, the Chancellor's investigation was relentless. Financial records surfaced, revealing payments to intermediaries tied to the supplier. Letters were intercepted, their coded language deciphered to expose Henri's schemes. Each discovery tightened the net around him. Weeks later, the evidence was irrefutable. In a dramatic council meeting, Chancellor Etienne presented his findings to the king. The hall was packed with courtiers, their faces a mix of anticipation and dread. Eloise was invited to attend, her presence a reminder of the events that had set this chain of justice in motion. "Your Majesty," Etienne began, his voice steady, "our investigation has uncovered undeniable proof that Count Henri orchestrated the tampering of materials destined for the Royal Commission. His actions were not merely an attack on a craftswoman's livelihood but an affront to the crown itself, sowing discord and dishonesty within your realm. The murmurs that followed were deafening. All eyes turned to Henri, who stood rigid, his face pale, but his expression defiant. King Louis rose from his throne, his gaze piercing. "Count Henri, you were entrusted with a position of privilege and responsibility. Yet you chose to abuse that trust for personal gain, threatening the integrity of this court and the prosperity of the kingdom. Have you anything to say in your defense?" Henri, sensing the futility of denial but too proud to admit guilt, responded coldly. "Your Majesty, I have been wrongfully accused. The evidence is circumstantial, and the accusations are born of envy and malice." The king's expression darkened. "Your arrogance blinds you, Henri. The evidence speaks for itself, and your refusal to accept accountability only confirms your guilt." With that, Louis pronounced his judgment. Henri was to be stripped of his titles and lands, banished from the court, and exiled from the kingdom. His estate would be redistributed to those who had suffered under his schemes, a gesture of restitution and justice. As Henri was escorted from the hall, the weight of his downfall settled over the court. It was a stark reminder that corruption, no matter how deeply entrenched, would not go unpunished under King Louis's rule. The resolution of Henri's case marked a turning point for the kingdom. Inspired by Eloise's courage and the king's unwavering commitment to justice, reforms were introduced to ensure greater accountability among the nobility. A council of oversight was established, tasked with investigating grievances brought by commoners and courtiers alike. The message was clear: integrity would be upheld, and deceit would not be tolerated. For Eloise, the aftermath of the investigation brought both relief and new opportunities. Her reputation, once threatened, now soared to unprecedented heights. No longer seen as merely a craftswoman, she became a symbol of resilience and ethical artistry. Her quiet village transformed into a hub of activity, attracting weavers, dyers, and merchants eager to learn from her and contribute to her legacy. Recognizing her wisdom and moral clarity, King Louis invited Eloise to serve as an advisor. Though she initially hesitated, feeling unworthy of such a role, she ultimately accepted, seeing it as an opportunity to influence the kingdom beyond her loom. Her counsel proved invaluable, not only in matters of trade and craftsmanship, but also in navigating the complex interplay of politics and morality. Under royal patronage, Eloise's village flourished. The king funded the establishment of a guild of weavers and dyers, with Eloise at its helm. This guild became renowned across Europe, its members producing textiles celebrated not just for their beauty but for their ethical standards. Travelers and dignitaries visited the village, drawn by tales of the enigmatic woman whose loom wove not only silk but also the principles of truth and justice. Eloise herself remained humble amidst her success. She continued to work at her loom, finding solace and purpose in the rhythmic motion of weaving. Each piece she created carried a part of her story, a testament to the power of integrity and the enduring strength of a single thread of truth. As the years passed, the legacy of Count Henri's downfall and Eloise's triumph became part of the kingdom's collective memory. Songs were sung, and stories were told, celebrating the weaver who dared to stand against deceit and prevailed. For Eloise, the true reward was not the accolades or the prosperity of her village, but the knowledge that her actions had helped weave a stronger, more just fabric for the kingdom she called home. Chapter 5: The Legacy of the Loom. Decades after Eloise first arrived in her quiet, forested village, her name had transcended borders, becoming synonymous with artistry, virtue, and resilience. What began as a modest craft had evolved into a legacy that reshaped the perceptions of craftsmanship and morality across Europe. Eloise's fame reached royal courts far beyond France. Monarchs from England, Spain, and even the Holy Roman Empire sought her silks, not merely for their unparalleled beauty but for the ideals they represented. To possess a garment made from her loom was to wear a symbol of honor and truth, a silent declaration of one's commitment to integrity. A loom beyond compare. Eloise's loom, an intricate creation of wood and metal, became a thing of legend. Craftsmen marveled at its construction, but Eloise always insisted that its magic lay not in its mechanics, but in the hands and heart of the weaver. It was said that as she worked, her focus was so intense that the very air seemed to hum with energy. Her loom became an extension of her spirit, every thread infused with her unwavering dedication to quality and truth. By the time Eloise reached her twilight years, her workshop had grown into an institution. Apprentices from all over Europe traveled to her village to learn not just the techniques of weaving but the philosophy that guided her work. To weave with honor became the guild's motto, a creed passed down to every new generation of craftsmen and craftswomen. The passing of a legend. Eloise's passing was a moment of profound loss for her village and the wider world. In her final days, she worked quietly at her loom, completing one last piece, a shawl imbued with the soft blues of a summer sky and the golden hues of a sunset. It was a gift to the village she had come to call home, a final gesture of gratitude for the community that had sheltered and supported her. Her funeral drew visitors from across Europe. Kings and queens sent emissaries, and merchants brought offerings of rare dyes and fine threads. The villagers, however, chose to honor her not with grandeur but with simplicity, just as she would have wanted. Her loom was placed in the village square, surrounded by flowers, where mourners gathered to share stories of her wisdom, kindness, and courage. A living legacy. Eloise's loom was preserved as a relic, housed in a small museum established in her village. Over the years, the museum became a pilgrimage site for artisans, historians, and admirers. Visitors marveled at the loom, imagining the countless masterpieces it had produced and the quiet strength of the woman who had wielded it. The guild Eloise had founded thrived, its members carrying forward her principles of ethical craftsmanship. They maintained her techniques, ensuring that every piece of silk, linen, or wool they produced met the high standards she had set. In time, these values influenced the broader textile industry, prompting a shift toward fair practices and sustainability. Eloise's impact extended beyond her craft. Philosophers cited her story as an example of how individual integrity could inspire societal change. Poets immortalized her in verses, likening her loom to the spindle of fate, weaving the threads of destiny with care and precision. The phrase that endured. The phrase "to weave with honor" entered the French lexicon as a testament to Eloise's enduring influence. Initially used among weavers, it grew to encompass a broader meaning, signifying any endeavor undertaken with honesty, diligence, and respect for others. Parents taught their children the saying as a moral lesson, and leaders invoked it in moments of ethical decision-making. In the centuries that followed, Eloise's story was adapted into plays, novels, and operas. Each retelling added new dimensions to her legend while preserving the core of her message, that truth and integrity are the strongest threads in the fabric of society. The eternal thread. Though Eloise's physical presence faded with time, her spirit remained woven into the lives of those she had touched. Her village, once a secluded hamlet, became a thriving hub of creativity and commerce, known as La Cité des Tisserands, the City of Weavers. Annual festivals celebrated her life, with artisans showcasing their finest works and scholars presenting research on her techniques and legacy. Even as the world evolved, Eloise's loom remained a timeless symbol. During times of turmoil, leaders and citizens alike looked to her story for guidance, reminded that true strength lay not in power or wealth, but in steadfast adherence to principles. Conclusion. Eloise's tale is more than the story of a weaver, it is a testament to the transformative power of integrity, creativity, and courage. Her legacy teaches that even in the face of corruption and adversity, one person's commitment to truth can ripple outward, altering the course of history. As the sun sets over her village, the loom stands silent but eternal, a reminder of the woman who wove not just silk, but the values of a better world. The threads of her life, like her silks, shimmer with the essence of moonlight, unbroken and unyielding, a beacon for generations to come.